Well, good morning. My name is Dr. Terry Mortenson. I'm with Answers in Genesis, which is a creation ministry that is proclaiming the gospel and defending the truth of the Bible right from the very first verse. And we're based in northern Kentucky in the Cincinnati area. And this morning I want to talk to you about dinosaurs and the Bible. Now, dinosaurs are very popular today. There are a lot of dinosaur toys. There are a lot of dinosaur books. Quite a few dinosaur books, actually. Really, a very large number of dinosaur books. And those aren't all the dinosaur books. But those books all have one thing in common. They teach about dinosaurs, of course, but they also are teaching people about evolution and millions of years. And parents buy these books, kids buy these books, and they're learning about dinosaurs, but in the process, they're getting indoctrinated with an evolutionary view of dinosaurs. And I want to show you some reasons today why we should reject that view and believe what the Bible has to say. Now, it's not just children that they're trying to convince, but also adults. Here's a cover story from National Geographic. Dinosaurs take wing, the origin of birds. Most evolutionists believe that the way that we got birds was that dinosaurs evolved into birds. Here's an article from National Geographic in November 1999. Feathers for T-Rex. We're going to come back to that article in a moment, but I've had the privilege of speaking in 35 countries, and in every country, somebody has asked me a question like this. How do you fit dinosaurs into the Bible? And when they ask that question, what they're thinking is, how do you fit the fact that dinosaurs were these vicious, meat-eating creatures that ripped other creatures apart, and they lived millions of years ago? How do you fit that into the Bible? And the answer is very easy. You don't. You don't fit the evolutionary interpretation of the fossil evidence for dinosaurs into the Bible. Instead, what we need to do is build our thinking on the Word of God and let that help us to understand the dinosaurs. And so that's what we're going to do this morning, but I want to begin by showing you a little of what the evolutionists say about dinosaurs. This is a chart from Encyclopedia Britannica, which is not a Christian publication. And they show you that the first dinosaurs evolved into existence about 245 million years ago. The first ones were small. They evolved into the really big ones. And then they all went extinct about 65 million years ago. This is another chart from that encyclopedia. And they show you that, according to evolutionists, all the crocodiles and alligators and all the different kinds of dinosaurs, T-Rex, Brachiosaurus, Stegosaurus, Triceratops, they're all descended from a common ancestor, an archosaur, that they don't have a picture of. But I've noticed that evolutionists don't spend very much time talking about where dinosaurs came from. They would rather spend their time talking about what dinosaurs evolved into, which is birds. And in this chart, they say that a half bird, half reptile was Archaeopteryx, on the way to becoming a full bird. There are many evolutionists that don't agree with that because, in fact, there's good evidence that Archaeopteryx was 100% bird, and in fact, there are real indisputable birds deeper in the fossil record than Archaeopteryx. But they tend to focus on what happened to the dinosaurs. The demise of T-Rex and most other dinosaurs some 65 million years ago may grab all the headlines, but paleontologists are equally concerned with puzzling out how these mighty beasts got their start. Who were their ancestors? They don't know, and they don't spend much time talking about that. Instead, they focus on dinosaurs evolving into birds. A few years ago, I was speaking in Bozeman, Montana, and on a Sunday afternoon, when I had some free time, my host took me to the Montana State University Museum of the Rockies, which has arguably one of the best dinosaur fossils collections in the country, even in the world. And so I went through the museum, And of course, under virtually every dinosaur fossil, there was a little label that talked about millions of years. And then as I was leaving the museum proper to go back out into the lobby, I came to a television screen. And it had a video that was constantly playing, showing birds. Birds taking off, landing, splashing water, preening their feathers. And there was a sign above the television that you can barely see. I'm going to show you what it said. It says, "Birds are living dinosaurs." Well, I've got news for you, folks. Birds are birds. That's playing language games. Well, Richard Lewontin is a leading evolutionist. He has this chart in an article in Scientific American a few years ago, comparing reptiles and birds. And he said this: "Evolution of birds from reptiles can be considered a process of adaptation by which birds solve the problem of flight." Now, one of the things that you should do, if you haven't started already doing it, is when you read a statement by an evolutionist about evolution, you should read it and then read it again slowly, because often you will see a problem if you do. Evolution of birds from reptiles can be considered a process of adaptation by which birds solve the problem of flight. Well, folks, if they were already birds, they already knew how to fly. And if they didn't know how to fly, they didn't figure it out. Because if it was that easy, Orville and Wilbur Wright wouldn't have had to do all those experiments to figure out how to fly. They should have said by which reptiles solved the problem of flight. But that would be just as ridiculous. But notice in their chart, he compares the bones. They're actually quite different. The reptile bones have marrow. Most bird bones are hollow with a crisscrossing structure, like a worn truss that are used in bridges. It makes their bones very light but very strong for flight. Their forelimbs are similar. They have the same bones, but the reptile has very short arms and the bird has very long arms. Their sternums are similar, but they're significantly different, and their skin covering is different. Reptiles have scales. Birds have feathers. And dinosaur skin is actually a little bit more like scutes that we find on crocodiles and turtles rather than scales like we see on snakes. And these scutes are bony material and very hard. But that's very different from a feather. And you can see that just obviously with your naked eye. But when we use a microscope to look at feathers, it's even more obvious that they're not the same thing, and that you can't just gradually dissolve scales or scutes or get them frayed on the edges to become feathers. Here's a feather magnified a couple thousand times under the microscope. It's a system of barbs and barbules, and if you crank up the power a little bit more, this part of the feather is on a hinge, and it swings over on that other part. And so you pull down a feather, and it pulls it apart. You go up the feather, and it zips it back together again. Very complex structure, and nothing like the structure of a scute or scales. There's another difference between birds and reptiles. Reptiles have a two-way breathing system, just like we do. They have a diaphragm. So the air goes in, and the diaphragm functions like a bellow. It pushes the air back out. But birds have a totally unique breathing system. It's a one-way system. They have no diaphragm. And the air goes into the lungs. It doesn't go back out the same way. It goes through some hollow bones, some sacs in the body, and then it goes back through the lung, out the body. And that allows for a continuous flow of air through the lung, which makes flight possible. Now think about this. How do you change a two-way system with a diaphragm into a one-way system without a diaphragm and still have the creature survive? You can only miss a few breaths and then you're dead. Evolutionists believe that some reptile figured out flight, and they've proposed a couple of theories. One is what I call the ground-to-air theory. The idea here is that a reptile was running along. He was trying to catch some food. His arms were rather flabby. They were flapping in the wind. The scales got frayed on the edges, and pretty soon he just took off. Of course, do you realize how long he would have to run? He would have starved to death. A more popular view is the air-to-ground theory. The idea here is that there was a reptile up in the tree, and he thought, there has to be a lot faster way to get from this branch on this tree over to that branch on that tree than going all the way down this tree, across the ground, and up the other tree. And so he decided to jump. Of course, the first experiment would have been a disaster, because if he hadn't figured out physics, if he hadn't calculated the movement of the branch that he's on and the movement of the branch he's going to and the effects of gravity, it would have been a disaster. And if he survived, he would have thought, that was really dumb. I'm not doing that again. And if he didn't survive, his son would have thought, Dad was really stupid. I'm not doing that. That's supposedly the origin for flight and feathers. There is one other theory for the origin of feathers. I call it the keep warm theory. And that is that reptiles evolve feathers to stay warm. And so we don't know for sure, and the evolutionists certainly don't know for sure, but we kind of suspect that perhaps the first dino bird was something like a triceratops. But there's problems with this theory, and Alan Fiducia is a world expert on birds at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. He's an evolutionist, but he doesn't believe that dinosaurs evolved into birds. He says this: indeed, the simplest and most profound objection to all thermoregulatory theories, that's keep warm theories, is why feathers? Feathers are extremely complex, both structurally and embryologically. In other words, as they develop in the embryo. So there's a lot of problems with this idea that dinosaurs evolved into birds, but National Geographic wants us to believe that that happened. And in November of 1999, they published an article, Feathers for T-Rex, and they had a picture of a parent dinosaur and a baby dinosaur, and you can see in the picture the down feathers on the baby dinosaur. But you need to realize that's not a photograph. That's a painting based on evolutionist belief about what happened. They've never found fossil baby dinosaurs with down feathers. And they said in big, bold letters, new bird-like fossils are missing links in dinosaur evolution. Notice the verb, are. Not might be, not could be, not we suggest, are. Well, you open up the article and they've got a picture of this dino bird. They called it Archaeoraptor, and they said, we can now say that birds are theropods just as confidently as we say that humans are mammals. Well, what's a theropod? Most people don't know, so I'm going to show you a picture that the National Geographic did not show readers. That's a theropod. And once you see that, you see there's a problem, because the theropod has those short arms, but that dino bird has really long wings. They said, we're just as confident that birds are theropods as we are that humans are mammals. Well, are humans mammals? Yes. We give birth to live young, we have hair, or we feed our young milk. We're in the mammal category. We're not in the reptile or the bird category. We're more than mammals. We're made in the image of God, so we're distinct from all other creatures, but we're in the mammal category. They said, we're just as confident that birds are theropods. They said that in November 1999. But in March of 2000, they published a letter to the editor, little letter to the editor by a Chinese paleontologist who said in so many words, I hate to inform you of this, but the fossil on which you based that article was a fraud. It was the parts of a reptile fossil and parts of a bird fossil very cleverly glued together by Chinese farmers. Well, National Geographic had egg on their face. They commissioned an independent investigator who wrote an article in October of 2000, stuck in the back of the magazine, no beautiful full-color pictures, and it's quite an interesting read. Well, that was 2000. In 2003, Discover magazine, leading science magazine, interviewed Alan Fiducia. He was the one I quoted earlier about the keep warm theory. And they asked him, what about all the other evidence for feathered dinosaurs? Dr. Fiducia replied, when we see actual feathers preserved on specimens, we need to carefully determine if we are looking at secondarily flightless birds that have retained feathers and only superficially resemble dinosaurs, or if the specimens are in fact related to dinosaurs. That's a difficult issue to deal with right now, given the existence of fake fossils. Oh, well, that raises a question. So far, only one feathered dinosaur, Archaeoraptor, that was the one in National Geographic, has been publicly acknowledged as a forgery. You think there are others? Evolutionist Dr. Fiducia replied, Archaeoraptor is just the tip of the iceberg. There are scores of fake fossils out there, and they have cast a dark shadow over the whole field. When you go to these fossil shows, it's difficult to tell which ones are faked and which ones are not. I have heard that there is a fake fossil factory in northeastern China, in Liaoning province, near the deposits where many of these recent alleged feathered dinosaurs were found. That dino bird in National Geographic in 1999, they paid $80,000 for that fossil at a fossil trade show. Another paleontologist, evolutionist, said this, at the moment I don't trust any of these specimens until I see the x-rays. The whole commercial market for fossils has gotten riddled with fakery. Fiducia went on in his interview, journals like Nature, which is a leading technical journal in England, don't require specimens to be authenticated, and the specimens immediately end up back in China. So nobody can examine them. They may be miraculous discoveries, they may be missing links as they are claimed, but there's no way to authenticate any of this stuff. And yet, the reports keep coming out of China. Feathered fossils prove birds evolved from dinosaurs, say Chinese scientists. Well, they've never found feathers on dinosaurs fossils. The only way you can get a dinosaur to have feathers is to make a dinosaur with feathers. You glue the feathers on the dinosaur. That's the only scientific proven way to get it. And the problem of fake fossils in China is serious and growing. Rather than being excavated by paleontologists on fossil digs, most of the region's fossils are pulled from the ground by desperately poor farmers and then sold on to dealers and museums. So we don't even know for sure where they got the fossils, whether they got them out of the ground or what kind of rock layer they were in or whether they made them. Dr. Storrs Olsen is another evolutionist. He is another expert on birds. He's the curator of birds at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. He said this, there is not one undisputed example of a dinosaur with feathers. None. The public deserves to know this. Well, to change a reptile into bird, you've got to do more than change scales or scutes into feathers. You've got to change the breathing system, the skeletal system, the digestive system, the nervous system. You've got to construct bills and beaks. You have to master the art of nest building. Now, we do have good reason to believe from the fossil record that dinosaurs laid eggs in nests, but they didn't make nests in trees. That's an additional skill. They have to learn how to fly and navigate, and there are some birds that spend the summer in Greenland, and as the temperatures get colder, they make a non-stop flight to the southern tip of South America. Scientists don't know how they do that. They might navigate by the sun, but on a cloudy day, what do you do? And There's another bird that spends the summer in Alaska and makes a nonstop flight to Hawaii. It eats enough food to build up a store of energy because it loses 60% of its weight on its flight to Hawaii. Then you have to develop a sound-producing organ and learn songs, and each bird species has a different song. And then you've got to shrink the dinosaur to make the first bird, and then shrink that to make all the other birds. So I submit to you that the idea that dinosaurs evolved into birds is really impossible. But the evolutionists want us to believe this. And this is a chart from an evolutionary book on dinosaurs that I have. It shows the crocodiles, birds, and different kinds of dinosaurs are all related to a common ancestor, the archosaur. But in the diagram, you see that there are two colors of lines, gray and yellow. In my book, it's gray and black, but what do those mean? Well, those yellow lines indicate solid fossil evidence. Well, if that's the solid fossil evidence, then what's the gray lines? That's imagination. That's not solid fossil evidence. So let's get rid of that so that we can see the fossil evidence. And that looks like crocodiles have always been crocodiles, birds have always been birds, and different kinds of dinosaurs have always been different kinds of dinosaurs, just like God said. Now, we supposedly don't have any dinosaurs today, and so the question is, well, what happened to them? And the evolutionists have proposed a lot of different theories for the extinction of the dinosaurs. They ate too much. There was a famine. They didn't eat enough. Some really weird things like they died of gas produced by their own bodies. But the most popular view is a giant asteroid impact, and they think they found the smoking gun in a formation in the Gulf of Mexico. But Peter Makovitsky is the curator of dinosaurs at the Chicago Field Museum. He says this: the truth is that scientists don't really know what happened to the dinosaurs. Each hypothesis on its own doesn't fit the pattern very well. Was extinction gradual or sudden? The lack of data doesn't allow us to answer the question. So they really don't know where dinosaurs came from, and they don't spend much time even speculating about that. And they really don't have the evidence that dinosaurs evolved into birds, and they really don't know what happened to the dinosaurs. So let's consider what the Bible has to say. And the first thing we need to ask is, when did God create the dinosaurs? And the Bible gives us the 6 days of creation in Genesis 1, and the Bible indicates that God made the dinosaurs on the 6th day. And you say, well, now wait a minute. I've read Genesis 1. It doesn't say anything about dinosaurs. Well, you're right. The word dinosaur isn't there, but the word dog or elephant or hippo is not there either. But I know they were made on day 6 because God made all the land animals on day 6. And since dogs and hippos and elephants and dinosaurs are land animals, they were made on day 6. God expects us to use our brains when we read the Bible. But I've got photographic evidence anyway. Here's a rare photo from the Garden of Eden. And you can see those beautiful dinosaurs. But now wait a minute. How do we know what color the dinosaurs were? And the answer is, we don't. Because we rarely find fossilized skin. So they could have been wild colors like this. What happened to it? Yeah. Or they could have all been dull green like crocodiles and alligators. Well, then we have a question. Tyrannosaurus rex. They had teeth up to 6 inches long with serrated edges like a good steak knife. So the question then is, what did they eat when they were created? Well, according to the evolutionists, they ate anything they jolly well pleased. But we want to think biblically. Based on the biblical information, what did they eat? Would they have originally been categorized as a plant eater, a meat eater, a scavenger that ate dead things, or a plant and a meat eater. And if we're thinking biblically, we have to say that originally the T-Rex was a plant eater. Because in Genesis chapter 1, when God made Adam and Eve on the 6th day, after he had made all the land animals, including the dinosaurs, he said, I have given you every green plant, every herb that yields seed, which is on the face of all the earth, and every tree whose fruit yields seed, to you it shall be food. And also to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that creeps on the earth, in which there is life, I've given every green herb for food. And it was so. So the Bible indicates that originally, man and all the animals were vegetarian. And notice the emphasis of the verse. It says, every beast, every bird, everything that moves. So that means that the dinosaurs, like the lion and the eagle and the alligator, they were vegetarian. And those sharp teeth would be very useful in eating lots of plant material. I mean, it's tough to cut a tomato with a dull knife. So those teeth could have chomped into a lot of good, juicy plant material. And you say, yeah, but no, the sharp teeth proof that it ate meat. Well, researchers have discovered that 3/4 of crocodilians, alligators and crocodiles, intentionally eat fruit frequently. In fact, I've got a video showing them eating watermelon. And then you have bats. These are the jaws of 6 varieties of bats. One of those jaws goes with a bat that only eats blood. Another jaw goes with a bat that only eats fish. Another one only eats fruit. Another eats insects. One of those jaws goes with a bat that eats nectar and pollen. Which of the jaws goes with the bat that eats small mammals? Well, if you never saw those creatures alive, you'd have no way of knowing, because all those teeth look like they could be useful in eating small mammals. Well, the answer is B. Here you have 2 skulls that are very, very similar. Sharp canines, good molars for chewing on stuff. The top one is a fruit bat that eats only fruit. The bottom one is a wolf that eats meat. You see, sharp teeth don't prove what the creature ate. Sharp teeth just prove that the creature had sharp teeth. How'd you like to meet that guy in the forest? Don't worry about it. He eats only nuts, fruit, and other vegetation. A squirrel has very sharp teeth and sharp claws, but it's almost completely vegetarian. Here's an interesting exhibit at a zoo exhibit in Australia. Although all bears have teeth designed for eating meat, their diet consists mainly of plants. But now think about that. If their diet consists mainly of plants, why don't we say they have teeth designed to eat plants? That's what they eat. And there's one bear that has very sharp teeth and sharp claws, and it is strictly vegetarian. That is the panda bear. And it has those sharp teeth and claws to eat that tough bamboo. Did you hear about the lioness that refused to eat meat? Little Tyke was a little lion, and this man and his wife were at a zoo, and that little baby lion was being mauled by his mother, and they courageously reached in, grabbed that little thing, saved it, and they asked the zoo, can we take it home and nurture it and bring it back to good health? And they said, okay. So they took it back to their farm, and they nursed that little thing, and it grew to full maturity, and it never ate meat. They'd put meat in the milk bowl, it would drink the milk and leave the meat. They'd wrap meat in vegetable material, it'd eat the vegetables and leave the meat. It never ate meat its whole life, perfectly healthy, and its favorite friend at their farm was Becky the lamb. So, in the beginning, all the animals were vegetarian. Okay, well, if dinosaurs lived with people, why don't I find the word dinosaur in the Bible? Oh, well, that's easy. The reason it's not in the King James Bible is because it was translated in 1611. But the word dinosaur was not invented until 1841 by the British scientist Sir Richard Owen. So that's 230 years before the word was invented. So you wouldn't expect to find the word dinosaur in the Bible. Well, why isn't it in our modern translations? Well, those have all been done since Darwin published his theory in 1859, and our Bible scholars have been influenced more or less by evolutionary millions of years thinking. But there is a Hebrew word in the Old Testament. The Hebrew word is tanin. It appears a number of times, and the King James Bible usually translates that word as dragon. So in Isaiah 27, we have, in that day the Lord with his severe sword and great and strong will punish Leviathan, the fleeing serpent, Leviathan, that twisted serpent, and he will slay the reptile that is in the sea. What kind of creature is that? Doesn't sound like a whale or a fish. Maybe it was describing a plesiosaur. Now, the word dinosaur technically means land animal, giant, terrible lizard. And the Bible's not a biology textbook, so it doesn't use labels and classification the same way that scientists do. But then we come to Isaiah 30, and we read, "The burden of the beasts of the south, through a land of trouble and anguish, from which came the lioness and lion, the viper and the fiery flying serpent. They will carry their riches on the backs of young donkeys and their treasures on the humps of camels, to a people who shall not profit." Now, each of the creatures in green there is obviously a creature that Isaiah saw. So we should assume the fiery serpent is as well. Maybe he was seeing a pteranodon or a pterodactyl. But then there's an interesting description of a creature in the book of Job. God allowed Job to suffer all kinds of things from the attack of Satan, and Job tried to figure out his suffering, and God listened to them and his friends for 37 chapters, analyzing Job's condition. And then God began to ask questions of Job. And he asked him questions about all kinds of animals in chapter 38 through 41. Creatures that obviously Job saw. And in chapter 40, he says, "Now look at Behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox," so he's a vegetarian. "See now, his strength is in his hips, and his power is in the stomach, in his stomach muscles," so he's got really strong stomach muscles. "His bones are like beams of bronze, his ribs like bars of iron," so he's got really, really strong bones. "And he is the first of the ways of God." He's evidently the greatest land animal that God made. What creature was this? Well, I left out one verse. Verse 17 says, "He moves his tail like a cedar." And if you read in the marginal notes of most study Bibles, you'll read something like this in the King James 1611, an elephant, as some think, or as the KJV study Bible, the Ryrie study Bible today, usually believed to be the hippopotamus. But whoever wrote those marginal notes either wasn't paying careful attention to verse 17, or they haven't been to the zoo lately. Because that is the cedar of Lebanon, one of the biggest trees in the Middle East. And when it moves in the wind, it doesn't go like this. It's going to move really slowly in the wind. Well, there's a tail that would move like a cedar tree. Have you ever seen an elephant with a tail like that? No. Have you ever seen a hippo with a tail like that? No. But there are creatures that had tails like that. The giant sauropods. And just in case you haven't been to the zoo lately, that is an elephant tail. And when it moves, it goes like that. And that is a hippo tail. And when it moves, it goes like that. And if you see it going like that, you would be very wise to stand some distance away, because there will be something else moving from that same location. And it won't be pretty. So on day 6, you had hippos and elephants and dinosaurs. Well, we've still got hippos and elephants. What happened to the dinosaurs? Well, we go back to the Bible. And the Bible tells us that God created a very good creation. Man sinned against God, and that brought the judgment of God on the whole creation. But not only do evolutionists deny what the Bible says about creation, they also deny what the Bible says about the fall of man and God's curse on the creation. And so they say creatures have been killing each other for millions and millions of years. But Genesis says God cursed the creation after Adam sinned. He said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and beasts and every beast of the field." And when we come to the book of Romans in the New Testament, Paul says the whole creation is groaning and laboring together until now. So we now live not in the original very good creation. We now live in the fallen creation, a broken creation, a cursed creation. And we don't know if it happened instantly or gradually, but some creatures began to be carnivores. And creatures began to have disease. And we find in the fossil record evidence in dinosaur bones of brain tumors, cancer, and arthritis. And the world became very, very evil, the Bible says, so evil that the thoughts and intentions of the human heart were only evil continually. And so God said, I'm going to destroy the world. I'm going to send a flood. And he told Noah to take 2 of every kind of land animal and bird onto the ark. And as soon as we talk about the ark and dinosaurs, people scoff. Non-Christians scoff. Sadly, some Christians scoff. And they say, well, there's no way you could fit all those dinosaurs into the ark. Well, you couldn't fit that dinosaur in that ark, but that wasn't the ark. The Bible gives us the dimensions. It was equivalent to about 1.5 football fields long, about a half a football field wide, and 4 stories tall. Yeah, but you still couldn't fit all those dinosaurs into the ark. Well, we need to know some facts about dinosaurs. The first is that not all dinosaurs were big. The average size is about the size of a sheep or a small cow. There were some dinosaurs that were no bigger than a chicken at full maturity. Secondly, we need to know that dinosaurs were reptiles, and like all other reptiles, they never stopped growing. And they started out small. So here you have an alligator or crocodile, and that's just a little itty-bitty creature, and you could stick your finger in his little mouth and it'd just tickle your finger. But that thing is going to grow. And one day you don't want to stick anything in his mouth. The largest dinosaur eggs we've ever found are only a little bit bigger than an American football. So all the dinosaurs, the great Apatosaurus, the T-Rex, they all started out small. But then scientists have studied the growth pattern in dinosaur bones compared to the growth pattern in other creatures. And they've discovered that the great sauropods grew very little their first years of life. Then their growth was in a spurt in a very short period of time, and then they grew very little after that. So if Noah took the animals on the ark when they were young, they wouldn't be very big, and they wouldn't grow very much during that year on the ark. Most of their growth would be after the flood. But then people object. Oh, now wait a minute. Now you're trying to make things easy for Noah. No, we have to pay attention to what the Bible says. The Bible says Noah didn't go out and collect the animals. He went into the ark, and the Bible says in Genesis 7, God brought the animals to the ark. God would not bring the big Apatosaurus, the big T-Rex. Why? Because that would be grandma and grandpa. They don't have any reproductive potential after the flood. He's going to bring juvenile Apatosaurus, juvenile T-Rex, and they're going to be small, and they'll have a full life to reproduce after the flood. There's another fact we need to know. Evolutionists have multiplied the number of genres and species. Almost every new discovery gets a new species name. But there's a real problem. Well, there's a couple problems, because they don't usually find the whole skeleton. they'll find just a few bones, and they don't usually find the bones in perfect condition. They're smashed and broken, and they have to put them back together. And if a scientist in China finds some bones and gives that a species and genus name, and then a scientist in the United States finds some bones, maybe different bones, and gives that a different species and genus name, and then after many years they keep digging, they find more bones, and they end up finding, that's really the same creature, but they've already got different species and genus name. Here are two skulls that are remarkably similar, but they have not only different species names, that's the second name in their binomial classification, but they have a different genus name. But there's less variation between those skulls than there is between those three dog skulls. And they're all the same species, Canis lupus. So Noah didn't have to take two of every one of those ceratops on the ark. He just took two ceratops. And all of that variety in those ceratops is either a result of genetic variation built into the original ceratop kind, or some of it may be the result of mutations. He just took two ceratops. He didn't take any of those dogs on the ark, we know, because all of those dogs are the result of artificial breeding by humans over the last 300 to 400 years. He just took two of the dog kind on the ark. So as creationists have studied the evidence that evolutionists have uncovered, we think there were probably only 50 to 80 kinds of dinosaurs. All of them young as juveniles, some young even at full maturity, and there was plenty of room in the ark. And anything not in the ark died. Creatures which could run to higher ground would, but eventually there wouldn't be any higher ground, and they would be swept away by those floodwaters. And we would expect to find from that global flood billions of dead things buried in rock layers that were once soft sediments of sand, silt, clay, mud. We'd expect to find evidence that those rock layers, when they were soft, that they were deposited by water, not by wind in a desert. And if it was a global flood, we'd expect to find that evidence all over the earth. And the miracle of miracles is that's exactly what we find. Billions of dead things buried in rock layers laid down by water all over the earth. We find dinosaur bones on every continent. And sometimes we find them like this, where the bones are in roughly in the same relationship to each other when they were when the creature died. Now think about this. That's a huge dinosaur. You can't have that creature just walking along a usual path, dying of old age, and just falling down and lying there and slowly getting covered with sediments, wind-blown sediments, or a little bit of river sediments over hundreds of thousands of years. You won't have a fossil. That creature will be eaten by decay, by scavengers, decay processes. Sometimes we find fossilized dinosaur skin. That speaks of rapid burial and fossilization. And if the creature was fossilized rapidly, then that means that the rock layer that it's in was turned to stone rapidly. Sometimes we find footprints, and in rare cases, even footprints that preserve the skin detail. But if you walk along the ocean and you make footprints, how long does it take for the ocean to wash over that and completely erase your footprints? Unless that gets covered up with more sediment, it won't be preserved. It's not unusual to find T-Rexes with their head thrown back, and scientists interpret that as death throes in water. But if dinosaurs and humans live together, why don't we find dinosaurs and humans together in the fossil record? We don't find them together in the same rock layers. So that's proof positive that humans never lived when dinosaurs were alive. And we don't have dinosaurs today, as far as we know. So they're not living together. And the dinosaurs supposedly went extinct 65 million years ago. And in the rock layers between where we find them and the surface of the earth, excuse me, there are no human or dinosaur fossils. So that's just proof positive. They never lived at the same time. Well, no, it's not. There's a creature called the coelacanth. It was only known from the fossil record. And it supposedly went extinct with the dinosaurs because it disappeared from the fossil record in the same layer that the dinosaurs disappeared. And above that, no coelacanth fossils. So they said it went extinct. They said that until 1938 when they found the coelacanth, excuse me, swimming off the coast of Madagascar in 400 feet of water. And when they compared the living coelacanth with the fossil, it was virtually unchanged. Now, nobody believes that the coelacanth went extinct and then re-evolved into existence millions of years later. But we don't find coelacanths living in the fossil record with man. Well, of course, that's perfectly sensible because coelacanths live at 400 feet below sea level. Humans don't live down there. So why would we expect them to be together? Well, they said there were no fossils in the rocks from 65 million years up, but more recently they found them in rocks that they date to be 17 million years. So we can't even trust what they say about when they supposedly went extinct. Well, why did they become extinct if they did? Well, we once called the Cincinnati Zoo. They have an endangered species program, and we asked them, well, why do creatures go extinct? And they said, well, there are a number of reasons. Thank you very much. Thank you. Man overhunts them. Man destroys their habitat. Man brings disease into their population. Okay. Well, why did the dinosaurs go extinct? We asked the Cincinnati Zoo. They said, well, we don't know. But why couldn't it be the same reason? That man overhunted them after the flood, after they came off the ark. That man destroyed their habitat. That man brought disease into their population. Or that there was rapid climate change in the post-flood world. That maybe was the real demise, because creationists believe that at the end of the flood, we had very warm oceans, we had cool lands, we had the kind of atmospheric conditions that would allow for major ice storms, snowstorms that would become glaciers, and we would have an ice age, and so they could have perished because of the rapid climate change. But they might be still alive. Remember the coelacanth. Well, when did they become extinct if they did? Well, there's some very interesting evidence that it wasn't very long ago, if they are, in fact, extinct. And some of that evidence has been discovered by a lady by the name of Mary Schweitzer. She was a graduate student at the Montana State University in the 1990s, and she was in the lab with her assistant, and they were looking at a slice of T-Rex bone under the microscope. And the lab assistant said, Mary, you need to come over and look at this. I think I'm seeing red blood cells in this T-Rex bone. And so she went over and looked, and she said this: it was exactly like looking at a slice of modern bone. But of course I couldn't believe it. I said to the lab technician, the bones, after all, are 65 million years old. How could blood cells survive that long? Yeah, that's a great question. Blood cells break down very rapidly. Why couldn't she believe it? Because she's locked into the millions of years. She can't question that. If she questioned the millions of years, it would be the end of her PhD or the end of her scientific career. That was 1993. In 2005, after she had her PhD, she was now a professor at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and she found some more dinosaur bones, this time with evidence of soft tissue. And this is what she said about it.
I'm not going to believe this. When she picked up a small piece to stop the reaction by putting it in water, it stretched, and it sproinged, and it moved all over the place. So we knew we had something pretty unusual.
It appears to be soft tissue. When they look at neighboring parts of the bone, they're even more surprised.
Out popped the blood vessels. and they were pretty incredible. And I said, I don't believe it, that's not possible, we need to do it again and again. It's one of those just goosebump-inducing scientific moments, that's all I can say. And they don't really happen very often.
Blood vessels should not exist in fossilized bone. Many scientists believe organic molecules can't last more than 100,000 years. Yet Schweitzer's bone is 68 million years old.
I think the presence of soft tissues and cells indicates there's a process going on that we didn't have a clue about. So I think it means that we have to kind of rethink the whole chemical process of making a bone turn into a fossil.
What about rethinking the whole dating method? That is not questionable. Well, in 2015, they found some more evidence. Tiny, delicate vessels that carried blood through a duck-billed dinosaur 80 million years ago never fossilized and still contain the beast's tissue, a new study finds. But there's more soft tissue in the fossil record. In fact, Dr. Brian Thomas has cataloged, and he's got an ongoing catalog on the Institute for Creation Research website, documenting from the scientific literature observed evidence of soft tissue throughout the whole geological column, all the way back to supposedly the Cambrian 551 million years ago. None of that should be there, that soft tissue should be there if those bones are really that old. But there's more evidence that the dinosaur bones are not that old, because creation scientists, have decided to date dinosaur bones with carbon-14, unfossilized dinosaur bone, and there should be no carbon-14 in those bones, because carbon-14 decays rapidly compared to other radioactive isotopes, and the maximum you can date something with carbon-14 would be 80 to 100,000 years. So if the bones are really millions of years old, all the carbon-14 would have decayed back into nitrogen, and there would be none. But they have found dinosaur bones with measurable amounts of carbon-14 in them. Those carbon-14 ages are not the true age of the bones, because those are using evolutionary assumptions, and we don't know how to calibrate the C14 yet to get a correct date. But there shouldn't be any carbon-14 in those dinosaur bones. Many cultures of the world have dragon legends. The Chinese, of course, are the most famous. And in their zodiac, they have all these animals in their zodiac, and one of them is a dragon. The flag of Wales has a dragon on it. There are lots of legends of dragons, St. George killing the dragon. In the southwest United States, there is a petroglyph in Natural Bridges National Monument that bears striking resemblance to a dinosaur, specifically a brontosaurus with a long tail and neck and small head and all. Here is the carving on stone wall where there are other animals, and scientists, archaeologists think these were carved by Native American Indians a couple thousand years ago. Here's somebody bringing out the relief a little bit more. How did those American Indians draw such an accurate picture if they'd never seen the creature? The first dinosaur bones, as far as we know, were discovered in the early 19th century. And when they found the first bones, they didn't know what the creature was, because they just found one bone. It was a huge bone. They didn't know what it was. Then we have the tomb of Bishop Bell, an Anglican bishop who was buried in Carlisle Cathedral in England in 1496. It's a beautiful tomb. It's covered up with a carpet. The museum, the cathedral doesn't want people to know it's there, but we know it's there, and the creationists have gone to the cathedral and asked the custodian, could we look under the carpet? And they looked, and in the lid covering the tomb, there's a brass band cut into and embedded in that lid. And in that brass band, they can see clearly a picture of a bird, a fish, a dog, and what looks like two long-necked dinosaurs. But that's not the only place we see things like that. Here's some Egyptian art with two long-necked dinosaur-like creatures. Or this in Mesopotamia. Looks a lot like a sauropod. How in the world did those artists draw those pictures if they never saw the creature? And then there's a temple in Cambodia. It's in the jungles of Cambodia. It's very famous, from the 12th century after Jesus. And carved into the stone archway of one of the entrances is a number of different, very recognizable animals, including what looks exactly like a stegosaurus. How did the Cambodian artists carve that if they'd never seen the creature? And then we have what are called living fossils. These are creatures that evolutionists thought were extinct for millions of years, and then they find them alive. So for many years, the evolutionists said this Walamai pine went extinct 150 million years ago. They said that until 1994, when they found the Walamai pine growing in a forest, secluded forest, west of Sydney, Australia, less than 100 miles from where they found the fossils. And when they compared this fossil tree with the living, it was virtually unchanged. And they made an exhibit in a little museum, a replica. They don't want people to know where this forest is, but the sign at the bottom of the replica said, "The discovery of the Walamai pine is the equivalent of finding a small dinosaur still alive on the earth." Well, why couldn't it be similar to finding a really large dinosaur on the earth? They could be still alive. We have deep, deep jungles in the Congo, in the Amazon, in places in Papua New Guinea where people don't live. And there have been some tantalizing stories of people who live on the edge of those deep jungles who've reported seeing creatures from time to time that when they describe them to a Westerner, it sounds like they've seen a dinosaur. Now, those are just anecdotal. We don't have proof. But you can't take a photograph because you can fake a photograph of anything. So if they really do exist and we find one, we're going to have to cut off one of the legs or something, put it on an airplane, take it to Oxford University, and say, "Could you please identify this?" If they're alive, the evolutionists are going to have to scramble to change their theory, but it won't be a surprise to the creationists. Yeah, but what about those dragon legends? They talk about fire-breathing dragons. Well, that also is not so bizarre, because we have electric eels, and we have fireflies, and we have the bombardier beetle. Have you heard of the bombardier beetle? The bombardier beetle is a little beetle that has the ability to make two different chemicals in its body. And when it senses that it might be the lunch for a frog or something else, it shoots those chemicals into a combustion chamber where it adds another chemical, a catalyst, to speed up the chemical reaction. And then it's got two little cannons out its rear end, which it can swivel 180 degrees up and down or sideways, and it fires not a single shot, but they've now used high-speed cameras to discover that it's firing like machine gun fire, a noxious wet gas that is heated to the temperature, the boiling temperature of water, and shoots the enemy, and the enemy decides to find some other lunch, and the bombardier beetle walks away. So they found brain cavities in dinosaurs. They don't know exactly what was in there. Maybe there were chemical chambers in their heads. Maybe they could breathe fire. Well, we live in a generation that says the Bible can't be trusted in this scientific age. And the reason people say that is because we have cell phones and computers and refrigerators and cars. No, that's not why people say that. They say it because of the teaching of evolution in millions of years. And dinosaurs are a major way that the evolutionists are convincing the world of evolution and millions of years. Through the books, through movies like Jurassic Park, Lost World, through the museum displays and natural history museums. That's why we've built our creation museum, and we have a lot of dinosaurs there. But the world wants to know what the church is going to do about this, and most of the church, in all the countries I've been in and all the countries I haven't been in, most of the church just ignores this issue and says, well, don't worry about that. Just trust in Jesus. But the non-Christian world says, I can't trust in Jesus who's in this Bible if I can't trust the Bible. And I can't trust the Bible because science has proven that it's based on mythology. And so we've got a lot of answers on our website dealing with dinosaurs. And I've got a little booklet for you as you leave today. You will get that from my colleague, Lalo, about dinosaurs, so you can read some more and think some more about that. And if you come to the Creation Museum, you'll see our very famous Allosaurus fossil. We have 97% of the skull, 50% of the skeleton. It's been reconstructed and valued at over $1 million. We've got all kinds of life-size dinosaurs sculpted by one of our staff. And at the Ark Encounter, where you can see the Ark built to scale and see what it could have been like for them and how they could have fed the animals. And we've got some dinosaurs there, and we answer questions that people have. So encourage you to encourage your parents to plan a trip to northern Kentucky to see the Ark and the museum. So we like to call dinosaurs our missionary lizards because they help us explain the gospel. The reason that we know about dinosaurs is because of fossils. Fossils are dead things. Why is there death? Oh, that's because of sin. What has God done about sin? He sent the Lord Jesus Christ to pay the penalty for sin and rise from the dead for our forgiveness. So we use the Bible to explain the dinosaurs. They were created on the sixth day with Adam and Eve. They were created thousands of years ago. They were all originally vegetarian. There was no death before the fall, and the fossils are from Noah's flood. And so we want to encourage people to build all of their thinking on the Scriptures, not just their thinking about religion, about church, about morality, but even their thinking about dinosaurs. So I encourage you to read that little booklet and do some more investigation on our website. And I hope that was interesting and stimulating to your thinking. Thank you for your attention. Have a great day.